And welcome back to another episode of Meat Speak, powered by the certified Angus beef brand. I'm Bryan Shaw. With me, as always, Chef Tony Biggs.
Bryan, good morning. All right, we've got a lovely guest with us this morning, but I'll let you do the honors of the introduction.
Right? We say we have a guest, right? Although, truly, you're probably on the podcast as much as anybody, right? Even maybe myself. You're certainly much more enjoyed and appreciated than I. I'm just the conduit here. Joining us in studio is our good friend, our numero uno meat scientist, Diana Clark. How you doing?
Hey!
Thank you. It's good to be here. Or should I say, shank you.
Shank you very much.
On that note, I have a real affinity for the topic that we're going to discuss today, and a thing comes to mind, and it is the phrase, get busy living or get busy dying. Chef Tony, what do you think of that?
What is our topic today? Have you been to Mansfield, Ohio? Diana, have you been to Mansfield, Ohio?
I've been, but...
Have you? Really?
But...
Have you seen the epic movie called Shawshank Redemption?
It is a fantastic...
It can't...
It just makes you feel good all over, doesn't it?
Can't you just smell what the Biggs is cooking right now? Can't you tell that Bryan Chef, when we were at conference last week, and boy, I had a great time with him, and all of a sudden he came out of the closet with a black T-shirt on and said, Beef Shank Redemption.
Yes.
Oh!
Game on, right? Beef shanks we're not talking about Shawshanks. We're talking about beef shanks today. Something that has kind of been on the periphery, at least in the beef version, right? When we look at shanks, right, you think of veal, you think of lamb. You don't really think of cows, but anatomically, they're all pretty similar, yeah?
Yeah. They still... Muscle with a lot of collagen. You think about the shank near the foot of the animal or the hoof of the animal. It's going to have a lot of that collagen in there to help make that muscle work or those hooves move.
Yeah. So as we talk about beef shanks, right, there are, we always get this question of, hey, what's new out there? Well, it's not like the animal is growing new parts, right? I mean, evolution is a thing, I suppose. Every once in a while you see an extra rib that shows up, but not consistently. But the beef shank hasn't always been used for a whole lot. And we're starting to see some rumblings, some real world restaurant type examples of chefs using beef shank. Can you tell us a little bit about, first from a science perspective, when we talk about beef shanks, right? Mm-hmm. Right? It's the leg.
Kind of. So it's a little bit further down on the leg. So if you think about a round, that's going to be more of like your quadriceps, your hamstring, or your upper leg. And then then you start to think about your calf and your shin. That's the area of the shank, but the shank's going to even be further down, like closer towards your ankle. And I'm touching my leg right now, realizing that no one can actually see me doing that, so it's probably not helpful. But so if you're sitting there imagining, maybe you could just kind of to look down at your legs and you could see those differences. So that would be the hind shank, and then on the other end of the animal, you have the foreshank, which would be kind of closer up towards your wrists. Would be where that foreshank would sit.
Typically, this is a pretty tough cut of meat, right?
Oh yeah. If you were just to take that and cut it and try to grill it, it's going to be tough. Like I said before, because all of that collagen that's in there, and that collagen needs that low and slow heat to break down and gelatinize and become that gooey goodness that we all love. Interesting.
Chef, your experience playing with the shank, what kind of love do you give that thing? Because I've had your shank before. It's phenomenal, right? What are some of the things that you do to take this thing that is it's fairly tough,
well,
right?
Bryan, thank you. Shank you very much on that note. As Diana said, this is a very tough cut of meat. And like we said at annual conference, Brazing is a lost art. But this particular cut needs a lot of love, a lot of spices. And, of course, my friend, Chef Hugh McGivern from Scotland says, you got to pour on the parsley, Biggs, okay? Your picture didn't have enough chopped parsley on the shank. He's a critic. He always says something about my food anyway. But, what we do with food here, we make it fun. And so what we do is we'll put a pizza dough around that shank after it's been braising for 11 hours. And of course, Austin Powers would say, beef hot pocket, right? Beef hot pocket. Wow. You can serve that for 10 or 15 guests in the middle of the table with a beautiful pizza dough crust.
Oh, yeah.
And you've got a dish that's just going to wow everybody.
And you think about the shank, I mean, that's something that would usually be thrown into grinds. So price point on that. But then you have that beautiful shank sticking out in the middle of the table. You have the bone up and everything. It's just a gorgeous presentation.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more meat science, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about the shank, right? Cows have 4 legs. Last time I checked, unless farming accident. But when we talk about the shanks that we see pouring into some restaurants, we've actually got we're going to chat with our good friend Venoy Rogers coming up here in a little bit, and Venoy is basically sourcing a whole shank, serving it tableside asabuku. That's not just a shank, right? Which shank is that? And I'm not talking left or right. I mean, I guess maybe you can tell. I don't know.
No, yeah, actually you can tell now that I think about it. But usually hind shank is what's going to be utilized. That fore shank is going to be broken down, usually put into grinding material. Could only be used in a certain percentage in terms of ground chuck. But that fore shank, really, they don't save that to be sold whole. But your hind shank is kind of what they go to. And actually, that's the better one because it has more meat on it. So even if you were taking it like we've done at the Culinary Center and split it down the middle, you get more meat on both sides. Yeah. Versus if you use that fore shank, it's kind of hard to make it an even amount of meat on both sides. We've done it. It is possible, but stick to the hind shank. It's better.
Diane, when you split that at the Culinary Center, you have the marrow bone, right? I just feel like putting tequila and at the end of it a lime and salt and just slurping that. It's just amazing. And then eat the beef.
Oh, the beef is fantastic.
Yeah, I guess talk a little bit about that to give people a more visual representation of what that is of course you take the shank bone, you rip it down a bandsaw, split it lengthwise to open up that marrow cavity.
Yes, I've actually seen this once done at McGregor's Meat with a handsaw. I was very impressed with the chefs that did this. It took 4 of them. 1 of them was sawing and 3 were holding it down. They won the competition purely because of that. I thought it was incredible. But yeah, you just take it and you'll split it right down the center. You try to make sure that you have a good amount of meat on both sides. But majority of cut shops have the ability to do this without ease.
Yeah. How much does that shank weigh?
Or with
how much does that beef shank weigh? What's that weigh? Give or take.
I'd say 6 to 8 pounds.
6 to 8 pounds. So can you imagine 4 butchers that weigh over 300 pounds with a hacksaw splitting that thing down the middle? That's 2/4. That's 800 pounds of men cutting that down the center. They deserve an award.
It was pretty awesome.
I feel
I have to say, actually, 2 of them were females. So
impressive.
Okay.
I feel like that's like the modern day punchline to how many people does it take to change a light bulb. Well,
how many people does it take to saw a beef shank in half?
As we look at it, certain cuts that are out there, and Chef, I'll throw this to you first because you've been all over the world. You've cooked in all different cultures and cuisines. Your experience dealing with different things like lamb shank, veal shank, compared to the much, much larger beef shank, I guess, are there some real differences that you see outside of just the species specific, but do they perform the same?
Well, Brazing is the name of the game here. Okay, even when you go to Jordan and their national dish is called mansif, and that is a braised lamb in yogurt. It's Brazing. Okay, it's they use a dried yogurt called jamid. It looks like a little baseball or a softball, and it's been dried in the sun. And so they take that jamid and they break it down into a liquid, okay, and then with spices, cardamom, ginger, and all this, and that's how they braise the lamb. So when the lamb has actually been braised, same as the shank, but Americans love it more in red wine and brown sauce and those type of herbs. This is the Jordanian way. They will take that lamb that's just falling off the bone, beautiful, put that on an Arabic rice full of almonds and shrek bread, and then culturally they eat it with their hands, which is just such a family type of thing. And that's the Sunday dinner with all the butlers from the king's palace, and we're eating it with our hands, and it's just magical. So that's just one way to do it.
That's
a lot of
awesome.
spices, but same process, same type of cooking method in the braising.
Do you notice when you braise with different stuff, does it bring out different flavors within the beef?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Jamit is very strong dry yogurt flavor, so you're gonna get that yogurt flavor. And if you're not used to that pungent taste, you're gonna be like going, I'm not sure if I like that. But once you get used to it, it's one of those things you just can't stop eating, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Interesting. You know, Diana, not a lot of people know this, but before coming to work with beef as you do now, you actually came from a veal plant.
Yes, I did.
You know, long ago, early in my days, sort of in my transformative meathead years, a good friend of mine who just really enjoyed experimenting, playing with things. So he got on the conversation of bacon, right? And he's like, well, why isn't there such a thing as bacon from cows? And of course, now we fast forward 10 years later. Yeah, it's a thing. And I posed it to some of our meat scientists or meat science PhDs who were here back then, and they said, well, you know, cows and pigs, although different, anatomically are very similar. So they've all kind of got the same parts. Maybe they're a little bigger, maybe they're shaped a little different. The shanks, though, when you talk about the variations on your experience coming here from a veal plant before coming to work with beef, are they similar in terms of does that foreshank still basically go into grounds, or is that used differently in different species?
The foreshank of it, it's probably going to be used differently in different species. The foreshank of veal can still be used since there is a high demand for the veal shank. They would still utilize that for those applications, because a lot of times when you see it, it's more of your cross-cut shank, where they just take it and they cut it down the bandsaw about 1.5 inches thick, and then they can sell those to different markets. And you see a lot of even just ground veal being very popular as well. So depending on the species, we're going to break things down just slightly differently. I mean, even if looking at beef versus veal, they're the exact same animal, but since veal is so much smaller, you can basically break it down similar to a lamb, and you'll have a whole rib section, or you'll have a whole hind saddle. You're going to want to have things cut just a little bit thicker, so that way you have more meat on the plate, so to speak.
I'll tell you what, we're going to take a break here. We are going to switch gears. We're going to have a chat with our good friend Venoy Rogers from Bee Resort American Kitchen in Orlando, Florida. And then we will be back here with Chef Tony Biggs and Diana Clark here on Meat Speak, powered by the certified Angus beef brand. Joining me here on the Meat Speak podcast, Chef Venoy Rogers from American Kitchen in Orlando, Florida. Chef, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Bryan. It's good to hear from you.
Man, it's so good to talk to you. You know, when we were discussing laying out an entire episode around the beef shank, right? It's you know, one of those cuts that you see showing up on menus, not necessarily from a beef animal. You know, you see a lot of, you know, pork shanks or veal shanks or things like that. But you are the first one that kind of jumped to my mind as somebody who uses this. I guess, talk to me about, do you remember how you kind of came to the idea of, you know what, a beef shank by comparison is quite large. You know, I guess, where did you even get the idea to implement something like that on your menu?
You know what? I think it was my first trip down to, for the chef tour. And we got in that meat lab and we got around it. I'd seen it before, but to kind of get my hands on it and really touch and feel it in my first time just seeing it in Omaha. And it kind of just sparked something for me. So what I did was I had my first post in Florida, so to speak. I had two hotels. I had one which was kind of the main hotel, the larger one, and then I had a little tiny 100-room kind of boutique hotel with a more cafe type restaurant in it. And one of the things I was tasked with was kind of balancing out that food cost and everything. So I have to say that the value and the size of that piece of meat, thinking of those two things together when they kind of popped up in the same thought, it was like the bell went off. And
Yeah.
so that was when I first used it. Tried it myself first. I'd had some beef shank in some dishes prior to that, but getting my hands on it and really trying it myself, I was able to use it. I think the first time I used it was in an egg roll, which I kind of have repeated and done something similar here, but currently using it in on the regular menu. I think we have it in 3 dishes. I have it in a bolognese. I have it. We tuck it into an egg roll again for a carne con queso egg roll. And then now it's made its way kind of as front and center as the star of the show for our magical dining menu as a special option for our barbacoa tacos.
Excellent. And when you, I guess, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but when you talk about those tacos, I mean, that's, if memory serves me right, that is presented like bone in on the table.
100%. Yeah, I mean, 100%. You're right. It's a little bit more instead of just using it, because it's good beef, it's good quality meat. Um, Tons of flavor in there. Instead of just using it like as a backup dancer either or something kind of covered and processed up, we're loud and proud with it, so to speak. Clean that bone up a little bit, French it down. We're still able to take the part that we French off, that goes into our bolognese sauce, that goes into our egg roll, so we're not missing anything there. We just bring it down to a more manageable dinner size portion. It's still a shareable option, but it definitely opens some eyes and gets you some wows in this whole trend of big meat and tomahawks and bones and stuff like that.
Can you talk about as you get it in your back door? Do you have to do a lot of a lot of knife work to that, or I guess as you're looking at kind of from a practical standpoint, I guess what do you guys have to do to basically get that thing from out of the box onto a plate, in front of diners?
Well, so for me, it's not much. Obviously a professional, and I don't think even for your average home cook it'd be much because there's nothing hidden. We get after it to kind of get some of that silver skin and whatever visible or top sinew that we can get to, and we kind of clean it up to where all that stuff is pretty much gone, just to break it down. And as I've gotten into these more, over time, and I start to teach. I went from just my sous to now I'm showing some of the line cooks and everything like that. Some of that stuff doesn't even need to go. I know what I'm talking about. It's super thin and it'll actually cook out. It's just a matter of the look. We get it pretty clean on the outside, mainly due to the way we serve it. For the tacos, it's just right there on the table, and we serve it with a little pair of tongs, and it's meant to just kind of be pulled off. So we don't want too much resistance, or we don't want to make it any kind of toughness, any kind of trouble for the diner to get to. But what we use in the bolognese and in the egg rolls, that stuff gets kind of broken down like you would with the pulled pork. After it's braised off, after it's cooked, we kind of go at it, and you can that would actually limit some of the initial knife work. If you're going to break it down and turn it into a meat sauce or stuffing of some sort, it's very minimal. What you see out there, there's kind of a little big chunk of fat usually on them. I like to leave some of that, just for the flavor that it does, and take it off afterwards. But I'd say, to be fair, it's probably medium knife work. Yeah.
How about as our good friend, our former meat scientist here, Dr. Phil Bass, always used to say, the thing is you can't eat the bone. At least we haven't evolved to the point where as humans we can eat the bone. Have you guys found
right.
any uses for those bones, or do people take them home?
You know what? They do, and that's surprised that you asked. I don't know if maybe you've been one of those guests that asked to take the bone home or something, but people actually have. It's surprising the first few times it happened, and it's like, you got some of those rules, but we'll take it back. We'll flash it in the oven for him just to kind of get him as dry as a bone as we can, and wrap that thing up for him in their to go bag. But we've been thinking about some ways. What we tried to do, it's very minimal, but we actually stuff the cilantro into the bone, and it's basically sitting down in some bone marrow. So it's kind of full of that, and you can kind of,
Yeah.
when you pull it out, it's just a little bit, but that's all you need when you're dealing with that rich bone marrow fat, and you can kind of, shake that on your tortilla, before you make your taco. But the bone is definitely a crowd pleaser, and aside from cutting it in half, people taking it home, and then our little trick of kind of brushing out some of that bone marrow that's inside there, is one use.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Chef, take a minute if you could. Tell us a little bit about what folks, because you happen to be in an area of the country where, let's face it, everybody gets to Orlando, Florida, right? Because you're not that far from the mouse with the ears,
Yeah.
right? I mean, can you
Yeah.
tell us about, with people when they come and do the Disney experience, you guys are right there. What can people expect if they come into American Kitchen?
Well, in our place specifically, is we do understand that. We understand that people are coming from all over, whether it's international, people from the United States coming for the mouse, or the number of other things. I mean, they just keep packing stuff on. You still, even 10 miles down the road, 12 miles down the road, you got Universal and all its other attractions. So there's constantly people coming in there. It's definitely a blessing to be in that area. But one thing we've tried to do, Bryan, is we actually I've always tried to be well-rounded as possible as a chef, and I know people say jack of all trades but master of none. I don't believe that. It's cooking at the end of the day, and so what you can expect from American Kitchen is for us to be anything that you're looking for, or pretty much anything you're looking for in a restaurant experience. So, and I say that just getting a nod from one of the local foodie forums, Tasty Chomps, which is super well known, easily the most well-known foodie forum group in Central Florida here, who actually nominated us for their Magical Dining Roundup as one of the best steakhouses. And there was a list of,
That's
thank you
awesome.
very much. Yeah, we're not a steakhouse, but we do carry about 6 cuts of certified Angus beef, with now the including or not including the Shank, who's added in a few items on the regular menu and made its appearance on our Magical Dining. So for American Kitchen, just expect to be satisfied however you want to go. If you're looking for a more formal dish, or if you're looking for great bar food or snacks, or if you're looking for awesome steaks, dry aged beef, things like that, we also constantly have a rotating what I call is a market fish item. It's not necessarily a daily special, it's a market fish, which we'll get something in. We'll run anywhere from 1 day, 2 days, to sometimes it'll stay static, for a couple weeks, but taking advantage of the seafood that's around us. So that's, I think, the biggest expectations. We understand that there's actually some great competition, not only in the city of Orlando and around, with the talent that's coming up, and these chefs and cooks and restaurants that feel a little chip on their shoulder as being a touristy place, that are starting to try to prove themselves, to all the way down to the celebrity guys that you got, a mile down the road from us in Disney Springs.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Chef, that is about all the time that we have. I really appreciate you taking time to join us on here. And for those of you listening, if you are gearing up for the that family Disney trip where you throw the kids in the car for 17 hours. and yeah, we know the drill. Please go ahead and go see our friend Venoy Rogers, and that's in the B Resort. Is that right?
That's correct. We're located inside the B Resort. We are right outside of Disney Springs. Actually, we're technically on Disney property, but we're not. We're not all the way beyond the gates or what have you. But we're close by.
Excellent. Head on into American Kitchen. Get yourself a beef shank taco. Chef, thank you for taking time to join us on Meat Speak.
It's always a pleasure talking with you, Bryan.
Back here on the Meat Speak podcast, powered by the Certified Angus Beef brand. Bryan Shaw, Chef Tony Biggs, meat scientist Diana Clark. Back here, it's a day where we're giving shanks. There's so many puns that can be put out there. When you talk about the beef shank, it's just happiness. One of the things that I'm sorry, what's that?
Instead of Thanksgiving, Shanksgiving is right around the corner.
Right?
I love it.
Leave the bird. Get yourself.
Drop that in the deep fryer.
Wow.
Oof.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Just a
Okay.
thought.
You know, the beef shank, it's when you look at, we have to be very careful about some of the things that we talk about, because sometimes we're like, this is really cool. You guys should taste this. And then it's like, but you can only get it if you have a meat scientist in your back pocket. Which fortunately, we do. I mean, we could talk all day long about Merlot steaks and Lord knows what else can come off of. The fact of the matter is if nobody's making it at the packer level, you can't really get it. The beef shank, though, it's out there, right?
Yeah, definitely. We've had many people that have worked with their food distributors and they're able to get it, whether it's broadline or if it's a more of an independent. But they've had success. And usually you just have to order shank and they're going to deliver you that hind shank. So you can even have them split it for you too.
That's right. So, yeah, just to be clear, if you order shank, you're going to be getting hind shank.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see if anybody spec'd a fore shank.
Yeah.
What would show up?
I think they probably would look at you like you're nuts.
You know, if you really want to make your meat company or I know there's a sort of a love / adversarial relationship between most chefs and the person bringing stuff in their back door. If you really want to like irk your sales guy, just say, I would like a left shank, please.
Go to the ones that don't purchase certified Angus beef or sell it.
Let's
and
invite
do
Morton
that.
Anderson and we'll have him shank right.
That's
right.
That's right. You know, chef, one last thing, and shame on me for not addressing this sooner, is when you get the shank, you know, Venoy talked a little bit about, and we've talked about it with some of the barbecue guys who love those plate short ribs. There's still no good use of the bone. But when you get the shank, you're getting all the marrow, right?
Gosh,
all the glorious marrow. So if you could take us home, right? Give us your favorite use of bone marrow, because you're buying this shank in anyway. Man, don't waste the marrow.
Do not waste that marrow. It's gold, right, Diana?
Oh,
It is
yes.
just gold. We've done everything from caramelize the whole
good.
bone, and then we put some of nice, beautiful microgreens on top of that. That's a great presentation.
Oh, look gorgeous.
Serve that with a crusty bread and a little bit of bacon jam.
Dip right in there.
It's good enough for 2 or 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
It's just gorgeous. It adds flavor to soups, butters. You can do a beautiful beef fat butter. I mean, a marrow butter with a little bit of truffle oil, and it's just amazing.
Oh,
and
yeah.
if you don't use it, I'm going to get Shankenstein after you for Halloween.
Oh, you know, as I think about, like, I'm not a beach guy, but if I were to ever lay out on a beach, I just want you to baste me in marrow.
If we see you on the beach, my gosh, I'm gonna buy some brushes from Walmart and just dip them in oil and brush you.
Just baste me, please.
Base.
I have a Kramer image in my head right now. Seinfeld.
You know, Chef Tony Biggs, meat scientist Diana Clark, thank you for joining us on the podcast today. This is the Meat Speak podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, you can find us across most of your major podcasting platforms, or simply by visiting certifiedangusbeef.com/podcast, and you'll see Chef and my oversized heads there staring.
Hey, what
back
happened
at
to
you.
our cardboard duo of you and I? I saw a lot of pictures with that at conference.
You know, I would tell
happened
you,
to that?
but I don't want to ruin the surprise.
I think I saw it in your window. You're looking out into the parking lot. That's perfect.
It's
Right.
it's surveying the property right now, right? Be careful. Somebody's always watching. So if this is your first time listening, feel free, if you want a specific topic addressed, know that you can email us at podcast@certifiedangusbeef.com. And until next time, wait for it. Shanks for listening.